Hey everyone, welcome. Hit that subscribe button because today we're talking about James, and I promise you, this story is going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about success. Let me set the scene for you. James was a corporate lawyer in downtown Seattle. 38 years old, partner track at a major firm, pulling in a salary that most people only dream about. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Corner office on the 43rd floor with views of Elliott Bay. Designer suits. Expensive watch. The apartment in Capitol Hill that got featured in architectural magazines. He was winning at life, by every conventional measure. Except for one small problem, he couldn't breathe. Not literally. His lungs worked fine. But that feeling of taking a full, deep breath, of feeling relaxed and present and okay. That was gone. Had been gone for years, actually, but he'd gotten so good at ignoring it that he barely noticed anymore. His life was spreadsheets and billable hours and client meetings and performance reviews. He worked 70, 80-hour weeks regularly. Slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. His assistant managed his calendar so tightly that bathroom breaks were literally scheduled. He ate lunch at his desk, dinner was usually cold pizza at 9 p.m. at the office, and weekends were just catching up on the work he couldn't finish during the week. His doctor had been warning him for 2 years. Blood pressure through the roof. Stress hormones off the charts. Early signs of an ulcer. You need to slow down, the doctor kept saying. You need to find ways to decompress. James would nod, agree, promise to do better, and then go right back to his desk because there were 3 depositions next week and he hadn't even started preparing. The thing about high-functioning stress cases is that they are excellent at pretending everything is fine. James had perfected that performance. August 2021. Seattle was in the middle of that brutal heat wave, the one that broke temperature records and killed people. The city wasn't built for heat like that. James's office had AC, obviously, but his apartment building's system was struggling. He came home at midnight after a particularly brutal day, 16 hours straight, missed 2 meals. His vision was doing this thing where everything seemed slightly unreal. And his apartment was like an oven. 95 degrees inside, maybe more. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't even lie down, really. So at 2 in the morning, he went out to his building's roof deck. A few other residents had the same idea, but they left after a while. James stayed. Just sat there in his suit pants and undershirt, too exhausted to even change, watching the city lights and feeling absolutely nothing. Numb. Hollow. Running on fumes for so long that he'd forgotten what having actual energy felt like. That's when he heard it. This tiny, pitiful meowing coming from behind the roof access door. At first, he thought he was hallucinating, sleep deprivation will do that. But no, there it was again. He got up, walked over, and there was this tiny calico kitten, maybe 8 weeks old, trapped in the space between the door and the wall. Someone must have propped the door open earlier. The kitten got in, then the door closed. It had been there for who knows how long. No food, no water, in this insane heat. James picked up the kitten. It was so light, so fragile, just this tiny vibrating ball of fur and bones. And it looked up at him with these huge blue eyes, and something in James just broke. He sat down right there on a hot roof with this kitten in his hands, and he started sobbing. Full on, body shaking, crying like he hadn't cried since he was a kid. Because this tiny creature was suffering, was vulnerable, needed help so desperately, and James realized he felt exactly the same way. He was that kitten. Trapped. Overheated. Running out of time. And nobody was coming to help him because nobody knew he needed help because he was so good at pretending everything was fine. He took the kitten inside. Gave it water, not too much. He Googled it first to make sure he wasn't making things worse. Gave it some cold cuts from his mostly empty fridge. The kitten ate, drank, then curled up in James's lap and fell asleep instantly. And James sat there on his kitchen floor until sunrise, just watching this kitten breathe, feeling its tiny heartbeat against his hand, and something shifted. Something fundamental. He named her Olive. She was Calico, and Olive just felt right. First thing Monday morning, he took her to the vet. She was dehydrated and underweight but otherwise healthy. While he was at the vet's office, his assistant called 3 times. He ignored all 3 calls. That had never happened before. James never ignored calls. But he was busy. Olive needed him. Everything else could wait. Here's where it gets interesting. James couldn't bring himself to leave Olive alone in his apartment that first week. She was so tiny, so fragile. What if she got stuck somewhere? What if she needed something? So he started going home at 6 p.m. Left the office at a reasonable hour for the first time in years. His colleagues were shocked. His assistant looked at him like he'd grown a second head. But Olive needed dinner at 6:30, and James was going to be there to give it to her. That evening routine became sacred. 6 p.m., he'd leave, no matter what was happening at work. He'd get home, feed Olive, and then they'd just hang out. At first, he'd try to work from home, laptop open, phone nearby. But Olive had other ideas. She'd walk across his keyboard. Sit on his papers. Knock his phone off the coffee table. It was like she was saying, "Hey. You're home. Be home." So he started actually being home. He'd play with her, just simple stuff with a string toy or a ball. He'd watch her zoom around the apartment, attacking imaginary enemies. And slowly, gradually, he'd feel his shoulders drop, his jaw unclench, his breathing deepen. Within a month, something remarkable happened. His work didn't fall apart. That was the shocking part. He'd convinced himself that working 80 hours a week was necessary, that everything would collapse if he wasn't constantly available. But it didn't. His cases moved forward. His clients were fine. Turned out that well-rested, focused work for 50 hours was more effective than exhausted, scattered work for 80. Who knew? His doctor noticed the changes at his next checkup. Blood pressure was down. Not normal yet, but significantly improved. The stress markers in his blood work were better. When the doctor asked what changed, James said, "I got a cat." The doctor laughed, thought he was joking, then realized he wasn't. "Well," the doctor said, "whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Olive had this thing she did, still does, actually. Every night around 10 p.m., she'd go sit by the bedroom door and stare at James until he went to bed. Didn't matter if he was trying to finish something, didn't matter if he was mid-email. Olive would just sit there, unblinking, like a tiny furry alarm clock. And James would laugh, shut his laptop, and go to bed. Because you can't argue with a cat. They just wait you out. His sleep improved. His anxiety decreased. His work quality actually got better because he was thinking clearly for the first time in years. His colleagues started commenting on it, "You seem different. More relaxed. What's your secret?" He'd show them pictures of Olive, and some would get it, but most would just smile politely like he was crazy. But James didn't care. He'd found something that mattered more than their approval. A year after finding Olive, James made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He left the firm. Took a position as in-house counsel for a nonprofit. Huge pay cut. No more partner track. But regular hours. Meaningful work. Actual work-life balance. His old colleagues acted like he'd lost his mind. You're throwing away your career. Do you know how rare it is to make partner? But James just smiled. Because he'd learned something in that year with Olive. Success isn't about how much you earn or what title is on your business card. Success is being able to breathe. Being able to sleep. Being able to come home at 6 p.m. to a cat who's genuinely excited to see you. Olive is 3 years old now. James is healthier than he's been in a decade. His new job is challenging but sustainable. He's started dating again, actually has time for relationships now. He's taken up running, something he never had time for before. And every single one of these positive changes, every shift toward health and balance and actual happiness, it all traces back to that night on the roof. To choosing to stop. To choosing to help this tiny creature who needed him. To letting that moment of compassion crack open the armor he'd built around himself. Here's what gets me about James's story. The thing that saved him wasn't some dramatic intervention or rock-bottom moment. It was simply having a reason to leave work at 6 p.m. That's it. That's all it took to start the cascade of positive changes. One concrete reason to prioritize something other than work. And that reason was a 7-pound calico cat who needed dinner. We talk a lot about work-life balance like it's some complicated equation we need to solve. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just about having something in your life that matters more than your job. Something that needs you. Something that gives you permission to log off, to go home, to stop performing and start living. For James, that was Olive. There's actual science behind why this works. When you're stressed, your body is stuck in fight or flight mode. Your cortisol is elevated, your nervous system is on high alert, your brain is scanning for threats constantly. That's fine for short bursts, but when it's chronic, when it's months or years of never truly relaxing, it destroys you. Heart disease, stroke, immune system breakdown, mental health collapse, chronic stress kills. But when you pet a cat, when you feel that purr vibrating under your hand, something shifts. Your parasympathetic nervous system activates, that's your rest and digest mode. Your heart rate slows. Your blood pressure drops. Your cortisol levels decrease. You can't stay in fight or flight when there's a cat purring on your lap. It's physiologically impossible. The purr overrides the panic. That's not metaphor. That's measurable biological change. James described it to me like this: before Olive, I felt like I was drowning, but I'd convinced myself I was swimming. Everything was urgency and crisis and barely keeping my head above water. After Olive, I realized I'd been drowning in 3 feet of water. I could have just stood up at any time. I just needed someone to show me that was an option. That's profound, right? So many of us are drowning in 3 feet of water. We're suffering unnecessarily because we've accepted this story that this is just how life is, that everyone is overwhelmed and exhausted and barely hanging on, that this is normal. But it's not normal. It's not sustainable. And sometimes we need something external, a cat, a pet, a moment of crisis, to wake us up to that reality. I asked James what he'd say to someone in the position he used to be in. Someone working themselves to death, convincing themselves they can't change, that the demands on them are non-negotiable. He thought for a long moment, then said, I'd tell them that everything feels non-negotiable until you negotiate it. I thought I couldn't leave before 8 p.m. Turns out I could. I thought I needed to be available 24/7. Turns out I didn't. I thought taking time for myself was selfish and irresponsible. Turns out it was the most responsible thing I could do. And I needed Olive to teach me that because I wasn't going to figure it out on my own. Here's the question I want you to sit with: what are you drowning in that you could actually just stand up and walk out of? What exhaustion are you accepting as inevitable that's actually optional? What parts of your life are you sacrificing because you think you have to, when really, you're just scared to stop? Your cat knows you're more than your productivity. They don't care about your job title or your salary or how many hours you worked this week. They care that you're home. They care that you're present. They care that you've got hands to pet them and a lap to sit on and time to just be with them. That's it. That's all they need from you. And maybe that's all you need from yourself too: permission to just be, without constantly performing or achieving or proving your worth. James has a photo of Olive on his desk at his new job. It's from that first week, when she was still tiny and fragile. Whenever he's tempted to fall back into old patterns, to say yes to everything, to work through lunch, to stay late when he doesn't need to, he looks at that photo. He remembers that kitten trapped behind the door in the heat. He remembers how close he came to walking past her. He remembers making the choice to stop, to help, to care about something more than his endless to-do list. And he goes home at 6 p.m. That's the power of these relationships. They are not just companionship. They are anchors to reality. They are reminders of what actually matters. They are permission to be human in a world that wants us to be machines. They are proof that you can change, that you can choose differently, that you're not stuck even when it feels like you are. So drop a comment: what has your cat taught you about balance? About priorities? About being human instead of being productive? I want to hear your stories. And if you're reading this and you don't have a cat yet, but you're drowning in 3 feet of water, maybe this is your sign. Maybe there's an Olive waiting for you somewhere. Maybe your moment to choose differently is right now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories that'll make you feel things, and tonight, when you get home, put down your phone and just be with your cat for 10 minutes. No distractions. Just connection. You both deserve that. Until next time, remember, you're allowed to breathe. See you in the next one. Miu for now.